Good morning. My name is Holly Swanson, and I am the author of the book Set Up and Sold Out, Find Out What Green Really Means, which was published in 1995, and the author of Training for Treason, The Harmful Agenda Behind Education for Sustainability. I am a leading authority, of course, has to come down, a leading authority on the undisclosed political agenda of the environmental, now green movement. I am a national speaker, a frequent guest, a frequent guest on talk radio programs across the nation, and the founder and director of Operation Greenout and We Choose Freedom. We Choose Freedom is a national citizens campaign to uphold and pass on America's founding principles of freedom to our children. If we do not pass on our founding principles, everything else we do will be for naught. We can't carry on freedom unless our children understand the value of freedom. In addition, right now, We Choose Freedom is specifically focused on stopping the political indoctrination of America's children. I want to thank Freedom Force for inviting me to join you today and to share what I have learned over the last 20 years of studying and tracking the environmental movement. Briefly, just to give you a little bit of background about how I became involved in this, it was completely by accident. Back in the late 80s, I was hearing about spotted owls and old growth and wilderness areas, and depending on who you talked to, you would get a completely different perspective on what was going on. So I wanted to know more. So I decided to start attending environmental conferences. And what I heard there was shocking. It was not what I anticipated, because I care about the environment and animals just like most everyone else. But what I heard there was not about how do we create a healthier environment. If we need to legitimately stop some polluting of a stream or something like that, that's not what was being talked about. What was being talked about there from the big guns from Washington, D.C., was basically how to put farmers and ranchers out of business by using the Endangered Species Act, how to stop logging altogether in the Pacific Northwest by using the spotted owl. And that surprised me. And when you went out into the foyer, there was information there not only from the National Wildlife Federation, the Sierra Club, National Resource Defense Council, but also from the Socialist Party and the Green Party. At that time, 20 years ago, I did not understand the connection. The more conferences I attended, and I started reading everything I could get my hands on about the environmental movement, then I understood. The connection is this. The environmental movement is a political movement. It is not about the environment, although many people involved in the environmental movement got involved for legitimate purposes. The movement itself, the leadership, the national organizations, it is about imposing a political agenda on the American people, and that agenda mirrors Green Party goals and communism. It is not a nonpartisan movement. It is absolutely partisan. And what I want to be talking to you about today is specifically how environmental education is being used to impose that agenda in our schools. We're paying for it. To train our children, to politically indoctrinate our children to adopt beliefs, values, and goals that not only mirror Green Party goals, but also revolutionary communism. The facts are there. Extensive documentation in both Set Up and Sold Out and Training for Treason, as well as articles I have written since, confirm it. So, at the beginning, one of the things that I think is most important is to understand, and trust me, I've teased about this before, but I'm going to talk fast because we got a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to ask you to listen fast so we can get the job done. Okay, what is political indoctrination? It is the communist model of education. In a communist country, education is used as a weapon to control the children, and therefore you control the future population. Does that make sense? Exactly. As Lenin said, give us the child for 8 years, they'll be a communist forever. The communist model of education uses every subject every day and the entire school experience to reinforce communist beliefs and values. Now, this is what is happening in America's schools under the pretense of environmental education, and specifically education for sustainability programs, specifically climate change education, specifically environmental literacy, and other politicized instruction that is designed to train our children to adopt future beliefs in the present. In other words, teach them to be vegetarians now so they won't question that agenda in the future. Teach them that private property is a hazard to the environment so they will accept the abolition of private property, which is communism. Teach them that they need to walk, bike, or skateboard so they will accept the end to the fossil fuel era. Teach them this. Scare them to death that if they do not comply with this demand, they are not only creating a dead planet, they are putting themselves, their own life in jeopardy. Is that a decent thing to do to a child? Absolutely not. If we created a problem, we, not kindergartners, should be responsible as adults to straighten it out. We need to let them be kids. Our schools are on the verge of a complete takeover by the environmental movement. And let me share this from Training for Trees, and I'm going to be reading a lot of quotes out of here because it just hits the point, hits the nail on the head. Here's one, targeting the kindergartner vote. This is from an educators forum on education for sustainability. Educators forum, educating our children for a sustainable world. When we realize that kindergartners will vote in 12 short years, the impact education has on the future of our world snaps into focus. Luckily, learning communities are transforming the nature of education by modeling sustainable principles. Join the Center for Eco-Literacy and the Bioneers Youth Initiative to explore the role of educators in changing the world. Now, I would ask you, is that the purpose, as you understand it, of public education? Don't think so. The American standard of a politically neutral education is an essential safeguard to free thought, individual freedom, and the democratic process. When I said, if we do not stop the political indoctrination of our children, everything else we do will be for naught, is because of exactly that. You're not going to have a democratic process. You're going to have children that are trained to specifically vote for one ideology, Green Party ideology, communism. That is what they are going to learn. That is what they are going to vote for. That is what they are going to go out and be activists to impose on the American people. They'll accept it themselves. They will volunteer. They will submit. That's the problem. So we can do many, many things, but if we do not make stopping the political indoctrination of our children a top issue, an issue of national importance, an issue of national security, and we can do it, we can absolutely do it, then we lose our children, and if we lose our children to communist indoctrination, we lose our country to communist rule. Just to understand the urgency, may I reiterate, think of this. History reminds us of just how fast we can lose our children to a political movement. Think about this. Stalin, Lenin, Hitler, Castro, Mao, and others. It's a despicable, deceptive strategy, but unfortunately it works. And that's what we need to understand. It is a strategy. As I said, the environmental movement is a political movement. The focus is to advance a political agenda. Conveniently, environmental issues offer a huge variety of opportunities to twist those issues to advance a political agenda under the guise of environmental protection. How many regulations have we seen imposed through the clean water, through the idea of saving endangered species across the country, which have strangled the effectiveness and the opportunity of individual stewards to take care of the land. We have seen this going on, and it gets more and more powerful with each passing day. That's why we need to make careful distinctions between sound steps to create a healthier environment where there's a legitimate need and being coerced and manipulated and have legal precedent to force communism in under the guise of environmental protection. Those are two completely different things. We don't have to give up our goal of a healthy environment. We need to make distinctions, and that's the key word right here. Moving right along, as I said, what is happening in education today is that the environmental movement has successfully, it started with Earth Day. Earth Day is a political holiday for the Greens. It is an opportunity to impose that political agenda on our children, and not only impose it, celebrate it. Celebrate it across the board. You can't celebrate Christmas, but you can celebrate Earth Day. You can't celebrate Christmas, but you can celebrate Halloween. You can't celebrate the founding principles of our nation, but you can celebrate Earth Day. And Earth Day is no longer just Earth Day. Did you know it is now Earth Day, Earth Week, and Earth Month? And now it's make every day Earth Day in school. It is a saturation campaign to politically indoctrinate our children so no child can escape the indoctrination process. Now, this also goes, as you may be thinking, well, my child, my grandchild is safe because they're in a charter school or a private school. Well, the direction this is going, and 48 states have already adopted, 48 states have already adopted environmental literacy plans. Environmental literacy plans are an outdoor education program, an environmental education program, but the underlying point of the environmental literacy plan is to make it a graduation requirement to understand the green agenda. In other words, to understand these politicized curriculums, understand the goals of climate change, understand the goals of education for sustainability. So the children will be forced to learn that if they want to go to college. So whether it's homeschooling or charter schooling or a parochial school, it is designed to, as I said, make a political indoctrination program nationwide under the guise of environmental education. And it's a brilliant plan. It's a very deceptive plan. It's unfair to our children. If we want to preserve free thought and individual freedom, we absolutely have to jump on this and stop this now, because it's moving forward at warp speed, for lack of a better way to say it. What I'd like to do is go back just a step, and that is, where did this all start? Just to begin with, back in the 70s, back in the 60s, as many have mentioned already, we had Khrushchev saying, "We will take you over from within without firing a single shot." Well, as the Greens are very good at this, you distract over here. You have people focused over here. Look over here, look over here. We're creating hysteria over global warming, while over here, don't pay attention to the fact that we are politically indoctrinating your children. So what we have to do is we have to really clearly understand where this comes from and where it's going. Back to the point of where did it come from. In 1972, a document called the Blueprint for Survival was published, and that particular publication made up the whole issue of The Ecologist in 1972, January 1972, and then it was handed to participants in the first UN conference on the environment. So that was handed to those in the United Nations as literally a blueprint. What happened from there is very, very important. The Blueprint for Survival, not necessarily in its entirety, but on the basic premise, was adopted as the go-to text for the environmental movement. In other words, all these ideas for how to save the planet were written down. A sustainable society, the idea of inculcating or politically indoctrinating our children, the idea of a communist underlying tone of how to control people. Now, it not only was adopted as a go-to text for the environmental movement, but it was also the foundational document for the formation of the Green Party in Europe. The Green Party is not only a Green Party all across the world now, different places, but it also is the Green Party in the United States, although couched as a small, non-important environmental party. The Green Party of the United States is in cooperation, working in cooperation with the global green parties. When you understand Green Party goals mirror communism, that in itself is a question of ethics and treason, because this party is promoting this agenda, and the environmental movement is promoting the Green Party agenda, although the environmental movement has used millions upon millions upon millions upon millions, let me go into infinity, of dollars convincing the American people and our political leaders that it is a nonpartisan movement. This is deception, pure and simple. It is false advertising. If we were to put a product on the shelf and call it tuna when it was actually chicken, we would be in trouble for false advertising. The Greens are violating the public trust. They are advancing the political agenda of the Green Party, which mirrors communism, under the guise of environmental protection. When we understand that, we start looking at environmental issues instead of from the emotional cell that the environmental movement has been so effective at promoting. We start looking at these issues from a political standpoint. When we start looking at the issues from a political standpoint, the evidence is clear. It is undeniable. Let me read to you from the Blueprint for Survival, speaking specifically to political indoctrination and where we are today in 2016. I have to hold it up here because the light's not quite perfect. Okay, it is self-evident that no amount of legislation, administrative, or industrial change will create stable communities if the individuals who are meant to comprise them are not fitted for them. So you need to be fitted. As soon as the best means of inculcating the values of the stable society have been agreed upon, they should be incorporated into our educational systems. So as soon as the Greens figured out what the values should be, go ye forth and incorporate them into the educational system. Then it says, it may not be until the generation of 40 to 50-year-olds have been educated in these values that stable communities will achieve sufficient acceptance for them to be permanently useful. Hello? So back in 1972, the plan was laid out to incorporate the values of the Blueprint for Survival, which became the founding text for the Green Movement, into our schools as soon as those values became agreed upon. That's where the Green Party comes in. Now, how do you get them into the schools? That's where the environmental, now Green Movement, comes in. It's a very simple thing to understand as soon as you understand it. It's under layers and layers and layers of propaganda, which makes it harder to see, and that's on purpose. But when you think about this, think about Green Party, Green schools, Green Movement. There's a reason for the similarity in terms. Did you know that the U.S. Department of Education has a Green Ribbon Schools Award program? Now, that program is set to advance education for sustainability goals. The purpose of education for sustainability, which, by the way, the education for sustainability movement started in the United States, was spearheaded by none other than Senator John Kerry. And millions upon millions of dollars were put up for Second Nature, which is his brainchild, that is the organization he started, to go forward and push this program into colleges, universities, teach the teachers, so the teachers would go forward and teach our children these values. Now, the purpose of education for sustainability is to change the cultural, the religious, the social, the economic, and the political structure of our nation. What's left? Nothing. In other words, if you've got an organization that is designed to put a curriculum, a politicized curriculum into our schools, to change the cultural, the religious, the social, the economic, and political structure of our nation, what's the alternative? You don't make a plan like that unless you have an alternative that you're promoting. This is where the alignment, and it is documented repeatedly in Training for Treason, the alignment between Green Party goals and communism comes into play. Let me read to you what, and this goes directly to climate change, what the Green Party said back in 1989, before the issue of climate change became the issue of the moment. They said, okay, it confirms the greenhouse effect, now called global warming or climate change, is to trick the public into supporting the Green Party agenda. Okay, here's what the Green Party statement said. This urgency, along with other green issues and themes it interrelates, makes confronting the greenhouse a powerful organizing tool. Survival is highly motivating and may help us in building a mass movement that will lead to large-scale political and societal change in a very short period of time. Would you like me to read that again? Survival is highly motivating and may help us in building a mass movement that will lead to large-scale political and societal change in a very short period of time. The greenhouse is a powerful organizing tool. First of all, we would have to inform the public that the crisis is more immediate and severe than we are being told. Its implications are too great to wait for the universal scientific confirmation that only eco-catastrophe would establish. This is from the Green Party program, 1989. There's no question. The point there was to go out and create hysteria over the greenhouse, now global warming, climate change issue in order to build a mass social movement to create political and societal change. Has that been effective in the last few years? Yeah, since 1989. The environmental movement has been implementing this agenda. And what the environmental movement is very effective at is having all groups work toward the same goal at the same time. So you'll notice that whether it's the Sierra Club or the National Wildlife Federation or Gorbachev and the Earth Charter, they're all focused on climate change right now. Why? Because it's a powerful, powerful organizing tool. And the ambiguity of the fact of, oh, it's a hot summer day, oh, that's global warming, oh, there's a tornado, oh, that's global warming. Anything can be twisted into creating fear. And Hitler said it, you know, if you tell a lie long enough and you tell a big enough lie and there's no challenge to that lie, people will believe it. That's why this conference is so important. We need to challenge the false hysteria, especially being created among our children. They are scaring, the green movement is scaring our children into conformity and compliance, so they will learn under a communist model of education to support communism. It is dictating public policy from the classroom. Let me give you an exact example as we move forward on this of how our government is involved in this. And that is, let's go to the Education for Sustainability agenda of the Obama administration. This is in a letter that Arne Duncan sent to the UNESCO World Conference on Education for Sustainable Development, and this was back in 2009. And he said, President Obama intends to make our country one of the leaders in responding to global climate change. Then he goes on to say, these major changes require educating our people, both students and adults, about the importance of environmental sustainability and training our people in this developing field. We intend to do everything in our power to encourage education for sustainability. We intend to do everything in our power to encourage education for sustainability. Do you suppose that the statement, that powerful of a statement, was made without understanding the goals of the Education for Sustainability movement? are to change the cultural, religious, social, economic, and political structure of our nation? You would think before the administration of the United States, the President of the United States, or the U.S. Department of Education Secretary would make such a statement, they would do their homework, wouldn't you think? So, again, this is deceiving the American people under the pretense of sustainability, which is a word that can be stretched to mean anything, absolutely anything. I understand why you don't like that word, Dan. The point is it can be stretched to mean anything. So we need to understand also, again, this connection back, and I keep working back to this because it's vitally important to understand. It goes right back to the Green Party. The 1990 Green Party program specifically states, think education. A green educational policy will be based on modeling and teaching the following values: interconnectedness, ecological wisdom, and a sustainable lifestyle. What ecological wisdom has been renamed to is environmental literacy, a sustainable lifestyle, education for sustainability. A sustainable lifestyle, again, controlling how our children, basically teaching them to eat green, live green, worship green, and most importantly, truly vote green. And we right now need to understand one of the goals of one of the leading education for sustainability professors, Dr. David Orr, is to green the electoral map through education. The only way you can green the electoral map is literally is to understand the only party that could green the electoral map is the Green Party, correct? All right, so you're talking about using public education to advance a partisan political agenda under the guise of environmental education. And again, when I said the U.S. Department of Education has a Green Ribbon Schools program. Now, when you put the term green, it is no longer just a color. It represents a movement. We know that. And it also represents a political party. Now, can you imagine if the U.S. Department of Education, instead of dubbing this the Green Ribbon Schools program and imposing this in schools throughout the United States, what if they were to title it a Democrat Ribbon Schools program? How about a Republican Ribbon Schools program? How about a Libertarian Ribbon Schools program? Or more aptly, how about a Communist Ribbon Schools program? And give an award for the most communistic school in the country. So if you're dubbing a program and it aligns directly with the name of a political party, you are aligning the U.S. Department of Education directly and indirectly with promoting the goals of the Green Party. It's simple. But when it's presented as a wonderful idea to save the environment, you miss that simple point. That's why we absolutely must get green politics out of our schools, and we need to do that immediately, if not sooner. Every single day we are losing children to this movement because we don't understand what green really means. It's green communism. And again, a good way to understand what the agenda on climate change is, the agenda that's being taught to our children, is to go straight to an example of how this is infiltrating our schools and what is being taught to our children. Okay, recently I wrote an article titled Teaching Communism in Public Schools. Now, Portland Public Schools, and I just for a show of hands, how many of you are familiar with the Portland Public Schools Climate Change Resolution? Okay. The Portland Public Schools, the largest school district in the state of Oregon, 49,000 students, adopted a resolution on climate change in April, May of 2016. Now, that particular resolution made national headlines because the goal of that resolution, let me read this to you, Portland Public Schools will abandon the use of any adopted text material that is found to express doubt about the severity of the climate crisis or its root in human activities. So we are talking about banning books that question the validity of man-made global warming. That's indoctrination. Science is based on fact and inquiry, and more inquiry. This is political indoctrination. It is a way to silence parents, teachers, and students from asking questions. What happens to free thought? 49,000 students, and from preschool through high school, will be learning that global warming is real, man caused it, and there are some other goals that are critical to understand, because this program is a cookie cutter to go across the United States. Every school district, I'll tell you how. Okay, some of the other statements and goals of this climate change resolution are: redefine our economies, call for an end to the fossil fuel era, and all students should see themselves as activists and leaders for social justice and environmental justice. Now, that's political indoctrination. It's absolutely indoctrination. Now, if you do not know the definition of social justice, here it is. Education for Sustainability, one of the leading groups in the Education for Sustainability movement, Facing the Future, defines social justice as: social justice is, and I'm going to give you the short version, social justice is achieving equality in the distribution of goods and wealth among all groups in society. Social justice is achieving equality in the distribution of goods and wealth among all groups in society. Hello? Communism. Now, perfect example, confirmation, evidence. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's a fact. The CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States, defines a communist system of government as communist, a system of government in which the state plans and controls the economy, and a single, often authoritarian party holds power. State controls are imposed with the elimination of private ownership of property or capital, meaning wealth, while claiming to make progress toward a higher social order in which all goods are equally shared by the people. Social justice is communism. Would you agree with that? Hello? They go straight across. Now, what's important to understand also is you cannot teach social justice as an environmental goal unless you're also teaching children that, apply this to your personal lives, that first of all, you cannot equally distribute goods and wealth unless first you have a government system in which goods and wealth can be seized and controlled. You can't distribute something that you cannot control, can you? So you have to, in order to teach social justice, you have to also teach students that in order to save the environment, you have to have a form of government with the power to first seize, then control the goods and the wealth in order to distribute the goods and the wealth. So what we are seeing is not only the imposition of the communist form of government, we are seeing the curriculum, the politicized curriculum, designed to teach our children very effectively to be against our form of government, our free enterprise system, private property, and to be for a form of government, a communist system of government. It is black and white. There's no wiggle room there. This is what our children are learning. In addition to this, shortly, within a couple of months after the Portland Resolution was adopted, very conveniently, the National Education Association adopted a resolution to adopt the Portland Resolution as a model for a national program, stating The NEA will encourage state and local affiliates to create climate literacy resolutions using as a model the Portland, Oregon School Board Climate Resolution. Okay, so it's very clear. The idea is you have the resolution now, and the National Education Association is encouraging their affiliates and the environmental movement, which was part of putting this resolution into place. About 30 environmental groups got together to present this resolution, to go forward and to slip this into school districts nationwide, slip this resolution into school districts nationwide before the American people understand what this climate change curriculum means, that it is politicized curriculum, that it mirrors communism, and do it before they understand the meaning of social justice. We cannot let that happen. We cannot let that happen. So we must absolutely take immediate and responsible action to basically head that off at the pass and help people through programs such as this to understand where it comes from, what it means, that it is communism, that it is grossly unfair to our children, what it means to the American people, and these are our children, these are our schools, these are our taxpayer dollars, and we need to reclaim our schools. We need to return them to safe havens of learning. We need to remove these politicized curriculums. We need to expel the environmental movement from our schools, and we can start with Earth Day. That's just a short period away. But we also need, between now and Earth Day, we need to do some work in our own school districts. We need to do work on the local, the state, and the national level. This is a national security issue. Would you say that loss of free thought, the imposition of communism on our children, and the impact that would have on our democratic process as well as our Constitution for our children to be trained to support world communism, is that an issue of national security? Absolutely. Absolutely. We have other issues that are pressing, of course, but this has to be in the top 3. If we lose our children, we lose our nation. If we lose our children to communist indoctrination, we lose our freedoms right along with them losing theirs. Okay, moving on. The important point here also is to understand how this is happening. The way it has been sold is the idea of taking over education under the pretense of greening our schools. That sounds very, very nice, doesn't it? We're going to create nicer spaces, we're going to create cleaner air, and we have to be able to make the distinction that it has nothing to do with the environment. Absolutely, positively nothing. The environment is simply a convenient tool. On the back of Set Up and Sold Out, I wrote a little quote from the Communist Party, and back in 1972, the Communist Party USA said, they must be the leaders and the organizers of the environmental movement. Has that happened? Yes. Have we been gullible? No, but we've been too trusting. Because nobody really likes to think that bad guys do what bad guys do, and that some people would put the power, the political power, over the well-being of a child. But there are those who are more concerned about political power than allowing a child to explore, grow up, and achieve their special gifts. This is why the American standard of a politically neutral public education has been so successful for so long to create independent thinkers like each and every one of us in this room. If we want to pass that value on, we have to protect our children now. It's also incredibly important, and I cannot emphasize this enough. Back to the quote on and from the Blueprint for Survival, the idea that in 20, 30, 50 years, the young people would be ready to adopt this idea with the efforts that they had been doing. It's important to understand we have youth in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, and some even in their 50s who have gone through, who have undergone despicable indoctrination practices in our schools. They have been ridiculed in class for being stupid to think free enterprise is a good idea. They have been ridiculed through grade discrimination. I had a high school, well, not one, but many high school students come up to me after a presentation and say, you know, this is what is happening in our biology department. If we do not put down on our papers what the teacher wants to hear, we will get a bad grade, and therefore that will lower our GPA, and therefore that will impact what college we get into. It's emotional blackmail. It isn't education. It is emotional blackmail. And, you know, in training for treason, this is back from 1973, actually. It's a quote on the difference between the American standard of education at that point in time, 1963, and the Soviet model. And it says, teachers in the United States refrain from interjecting political bias into their classroom work. My, how things have changed. That's not the quote, sorry. Anyway, teachers in the United States refrain from interjecting political bias in their classroom work. In the USSR, however, only one point of view, Marxism, Leninism, is permitted, and teachers are expected to present it to their pupils. Is that what's happening in Portland Public Schools? One point of view, one political point of view. That's what's so important. It's political indoctrination. And the environmental movement needs to be held accountable for advancing this agenda, for the deception, for the violation of the public trust, because this impacts every aspect of our society. Free enterprise, parental rights, religious freedoms, private property rights. Again, national security. It impacts every aspect of our lives. And those individuals, the individuals that I mentioned, the students who have been through this indoctrination process, we need to show them compassion, not anger. Our policy, our mission is to overturn bad public policy. Let them heal. When they understand they've been used, as we make this a national issue, they can see they've been used and manipulated, and they're intelligent, and they can heal. Our focus must be not on additional ridicule, but on helping them back. And environmental educators also have a passion, and they may not understand what they are involved in. We need to help them back. These are our compatriots, but we also need to take a firm, responsible, respectful stand and say, enough is enough. This has to come out of our schools. Now, one other thing, I know I'm running short on time, and I thank you for listening fast as I talk fast. But number 17 on the communist goals that were inserted into the congressional record in 1963 by Cleon Skousen, a former FBI agent. These are the goals of the Communist Party in the United States, 1963. It states, get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda, soften the curriculum, Common Core, get control of the teachers' associations, put the party line in textbooks. Has that been accomplished? Yes. We need to recognize that, and we need to move forward to change it. And in addition, as you know, Al Gore's global inconvenient truth has been shown in multiple classrooms, we need to understand that even global warming guru James Lovelock has said the climate models don't work. They're not reliable. He even said this, anyone who tries to predict, this is in a very recent interview, anyone who tries to predict more than 5 to 10 years is a bit of an idiot because so many things can change unexpectedly. The computer models just weren't reliable. In fact, I'm not sure the whole thing isn't crazy, this climate change. Glad he said that. Again, when we're looking at this, there's two things I want to add. One is the solution. Number two is to understand Ivanka Trump, 35, right in that range of young people that I mentioned. This is from Glenn Beck and the Blaze, December 1st. Ivanka Trump plans to use her role as first daughter to champion liberal causes such as combating climate change. Trump, 35, wants to make climate change one of her signature issues. She needs this DVD. She needs this DVD. And I would like to say this, and this is another quote. You know, I don't normally go around quoting Al Gore, but I'm going to make an exception. He said, And this was in his book, Earth and the Balance. When I said I read everything I could get my hands on, I did, because you can't understand an issue unless you look at both sides. And it is no accident that the very worst environmental tragedies were created by communist governments in which the power of the state completely overwhelms the capabilities of the individual steward. Al Gore. And that is absolutely true. Farmers, ranchers, miners, individuals have been put under the proverbial environmental or green thumb. We need to scrutinize regulations. We need to get this out of our schools. What is the solution? Again, to understand the environmental movement is a political movement, not an environmental movement. The agenda of the environmental movement mirrors Green Party goals and communism. The communist model of education is being imposed in schools across our nation. That must stop. We Choose Freedom, again, is a nationwide citizens campaign and national coalition focused on stopping the political indoctrination of our children. You can get in touch with us at wechooseFreedom@earthlink.net. Again, I cannot encourage you enough to understand this is one of the most important issues of our time. We each must make additional time to work on this issue. Again, if we lose our children to communist indoctrination, we lose our freedom, we lose freedom for our children, and we lose our nation to communist dictatorship. And again, we cannot let that happen. We just cannot let that happen. Thank you very much.